Hi, this is Michelle Esposito, and I will be speaking about employment inclusion for adults with developmental disabilities, specifically adults with developmental disabilities. This includes adults that um, are have intellectual disability, autism, cerebral palsy, and in some cases, seizures disorders. So those are the populations that I am focusing on. This has been my passion, and I wanted to emphasize on how important inclusion is for their overall well-being in society. So history. We've had employment programs available for adults with developmental disabilities throughout the years. We've come a long way from excluding them from society to making a better world for them. But is it perfect? Of course not. Um, just here in itself, you could see this is what we called sheltered employment. So the Fair Labor Standard Act historically section authorized employers to pay individuals with disabilities less than the minimum wage. So meaning they were making sense for building a box, building little items that were contracted with other companies, and this is how they made money. Of course, they weren't making a lot, which is the reason why I'm here speaking on behalf of these individuals. The movement for human rights advocacy has shifted the view of sub-minimum wage towards a human right issue, with 13 states now established legislations that prohibit or eliminate the practice. So this was early 2000s. This is not the case anymore, and we will see how that change comes about as I speak. But we still have a long way to go where we could say that we are fully including individuals with disabilities in society. So here I want to talk about the pros and cons of competitive employment and shelter employment. So competitive employment is the work that you can do, basically working at companies that pay us a fair wage or pay us minimum wage for the tasks that we complete. And shelter work is those that pay by cents depending on how many items you've completed. And as you can see, there's many types of shelter work. And one of the pictures I showed, they were building boxes. In this one, they seem to be building some other type of box. Or I've visited a couple shelters where some of them were building hole punchers and just very different things that they'll do contract with. And some of these contracts were actually government contracts as well. But competitor employment results in higher outcomes for productivity. So you're more engaged in more activities versus one repetitive activity, and the well-being is compared. It's compared to shelter work, being that it's repetitive, it it is strenuous, and there's a lot of hours of standing and just doing the same job over and over. Well, shelter work does have this social component because, as you can see, everybody's together, they're working as a team. It does give that sense of teamwork, but they're not exposed to the community, to other people who are not disabled, basically. They're just within their own peers, which I don't think it's fair, right? So, and it doesn't provide a sense of independency, which independency will always provide a high quality of life. Defining inclusive employment. Meaningful inclusion also includes community life engagement, which emphasizes the connection between employment and individuals' ability to engage in activities with their community to the same degree as people with disabilities. This is the perfect definition to what I mean by inclusion and employment. They have the ability to work, they want to work, they want to have a meaningful life just like you and me. So it's very important that they receive these services. On average, a state agency only reports spending 11% of their total day and employment budgets on integrated services, with the vast majority of funding still supporting segregated settings. So again, these programs are the shelter work, day programs, and other community engagement programs that, yes, they are within the community. They're supposed to be in the community, but they're segregated because they spend the majority of their time with their peers and not enough time around individuals without disabilities. Inclusion is less likely for individuals from marginalized backgrounds, those who are Black, Native American, or Hispanic, and significantly less likely to participate in an integrated job compared to the white workers with developmental disabilities. Again, this is probably because the majority of individuals who are white are more educated, so parents are more aware of services and resources versus communities that are low income may not know that these services exist, and a lot of times parents think that there are no supports for their child or there's no way their child could work, so they don't even seek it out for them. Strategies to improve inclusion. Improving inclusion requires a coordinated approach that integrates policy, implementation, and fiscal investment at the state level. Successful inclusion depends on a strong linkage between education and vocational rehabilitation to support a smooth transition into the workforce. Engage families in critical advocates and increase their expectations for integrated employment significantly improves outcomes. So again, this is more of that advocacy and collaboration between partners and all the people who serve individuals with developmental disabilities, because it's a full circle. It's a holistic approach that is very necessary. And there's always this big fear on cutbacks, and a lot of times people, parents more than anything, will fear losing benefits, will fear getting certain services cut back, and a lot of times these cutbacks are going to be to the non-necessary programs, which are inclusion programs. Usually it's community integrated programs, it's going to be employment programs, because there is a higher need for more medical programs than there is a need for the inclusion programs. And we saw this back in 2008 when the economy crashed. A lot of them received a huge cutback and a lot of extracurricular activities that they had for adults with developmental disabilities. So the fear of the Medicaid cutback is really big right now for these individuals, as well as all the education cutbacks that we've already seen parents struggle. If schools are not providing IPPs for individuals with developmental disabilities, then they're not getting that transition between education, vocational rehabilitation, for that transition into employment. And this is super important for a young adult to start thinking about their future, because they don't have a lot of options. So the sooner the better. With developmental disabilities in the labor force. So only 44% of adults with developmental disabilities ages 21 to 64 even participate in the labor force. And this was early 2003. It should be different now based on some changes that we have done. In 18% of 18% to 23% employment rates, suggesting that many of those jobs are not competitive integrated, which is a majority of the policy goals. So again, moving into a policy where there's less segregation is very important. Only 1 in 5 adults with intellectual disabilities participate in the labor force. So this is where we finally see some change and some growth with certain policies that came into place. So we did see at the beginning that we did get a policy that allowed for shelter work to not be the norm and for the norm to be more competitive employment. Employment First policy. The Employment First EF initiative in California is a significant policy shifting aim at the increasing competitive integrated employment for individuals with developmental disabilities. IDD. It serves as a foundation for services provided by the state agencies, including the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, State Council on Development Disabilities, and California Employment Consortium for Youth. So again, we are now moving into a people first, employment first mentality. Now, of course, this is based only for the state of California. A lot of other states do this differently, but the goal for integration in employment has always been the case across the board for a lot of states. The goal is to move individuals away from segregated settings like facility-based or day programs and shelter work and into a competitive integrated employment, CIE. CIE means working alongside with people with disabilities for competitive wages. Again, fair wages, the wages that mean you can make in regular employment. Along with the Employment First came a workforce initiative and opportunity act. This was passed in 2014, significantly bolstered California's state level system to change efforts by raising national expectations for integrated employment. State Council of Developmental Disabilities and California Employment Consortium for Youth 2014. WIOA specifically encourages and requires an increased coordination and collaboration among states and local agencies, including the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, the Department of Education, and the Department of Rehabilitation, Vocational Rehabilitation, and other community partners. So in the state of California, we have these centers called regional centers. They are across the state of California. There is 21 of them, and they all work in efforts to do all the mandates for adults with disabilities. They serve specifically individuals with developmental disabilities. So there's 5 categories of disabilities that fall into these individuals, and that would be intellectual disability, that will be Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, seizures, epilepsy, and I think I said them all. But yeah, so these are the qualifying disabilities in order to fall into the category of IDD, and then to fall in the category of working with the 21 regional centers. And they're based on the area you live in. Usually there's a regional center within your community, and they cover a county or a specific area. There's a couple in LA, just being because LA is such a huge city. The role of WIOA, based on the State Council on Developmental Disabilities and California Employment Consortium of Youth, WIOA also strains the focus on transition services for youth by requiring increased transition services, mandating strong transition services from school to post-secondary education or employment. Pre-employment transition services focusing on services like job exploration, work-based learning, self-advocacy to improve youth outcomes. Raise expectations, assume that all people with developmental disabilities can and should work in an integrated setting. Provide supports, ensure individuals have the necessary job preparation, transition services, and ongoing supports to achieve competitive integrated employment, CIE. So this is probably the biggest part of this act. When I started my career with adults with developmental disabilities, this is where I started. I began in an internship working with youth in that transition from, from school to post-secondary education or employment. So I did vocational training for a group of 14 to 16-year-olds who either would like to go to college at some point or would like to graduate and obtain a job. And it was so fascinating to see how many of these individuals didn't know that they could do this, that they thought that once they were never going to, go to college or have a job, and they were very excited. And were successful in employing a couple of those youth in certain programs or in job sites that were mom and pop places more than anything. But it was fascinating to watch them grow. And my favorite part about all of this is the assumption that all people with developmental disabilities can and should work. This changed the way that day programs were going to function, because now they had to put a employment setting in their program that before, if the client entered their day program and they said they wanted to work, they had to do whatever in their power to help him find a job. And that's where I ended most of my career, because I'm no longer in this area of expertise anymore. But I ran an employment program in a day program setting, and I saw a lot of adults become very independent very quickly, and it was just amazing to watch that. Even though I have some positive feedback on the work that I have done, we do need to understand that Employment First has gaps. And so this is slide Employment First, the gap between policy and practice. Only 12% of state-supported people with developmental disabilities receive integrated employment in California, and this was in 2018. The majority of individuals are attending facility-based network program. Again, those day programs, integrated community service programs, that's what they're called. They take them to the park, they take them to the library, they take them walk around at Walmart, and that's pretty much all they do. They're supposed to be doing employment activities while those activities are being done, whether that's going into Walmart and asking the manager if they're hiring, or possibly if there's computers there where they can filling out an application at that moment while they're there. But it's such a low percentage of trained staff to be able to do this that I feel like there's a gap there as well. Employment First in Action, California's DDS progress. So there is some progress, Of course, we've been doing this for a long time now, and has been a lot of change. So here are some numbers based on the individuals in California and how many are currently in some sort of CIE program. So participating in employment, that means that they are working in a integrated employment business. So a job like you and me have with minimum wage. So that's 31,948 people. That's a big number. That's amazing. Receiving employment services, that's about 12,000 individuals that are currently in some sort of program, vocational program, rehabilitation program, where they're receiving those services. And then they came up with this program called paid internship. So this program is basically, I go to a job site, let's say, for example, Ralph's, and I tell the manager, I have an adult that's willing to work, that really wants to do a training in their store, and the services would be free. So I will pay the individual's wage using this paid internship program. And so they get extra employers that they don't have to pay out of their own pocket. The program usually lasts about 3 months, depending on how many hours the individual is willing to work. And the goal is that we teach them the job so well, or they learn the job so well, or they're so capable and they have all the abilities that they get hired by this employer. And so then that number of 3,000 people can move that participating in an employment up. That's been the goal. This is more of an initiative. It's something that I've used in my years of practice, where I've done this with many companies. And yes, it works. Yes, it's a good program. However, it can also be taken advantage by some employers. So California is dedicated to supporting individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities to build meaningful connections in their communities and gain financial independence through employment. So that's the whole goal of the Employment First initiative. The gap between potential and participation. A persistent employment gap between adults with and without disabilities driven by systemic failure rather than individual capability. Perceptions are shaped by deep-rooted myths about productivity, negative attitudes from supervisors and coworkers. Fears of employment would result in loss of vital medical and cash benefits. So these are all those myths and ideas and things that just exist as being part of society. Employers may minimize the issue, viewing accommodation as a financial and administrative burden rather than a right. I have walked into many places of business where I have made an offer for a paid internship, or I have tried to do some sort of discovery where I support them with any gaps in support that can be jobs or tasks that an individual with disability can do. And a lot of times these employers will just say no because they don't know that it will benefit them, or they think that they're going to have to um, watch them, and it's more of a burden of, well, can this person even take care of themselves? So, and that's where training is so important, because these individuals receive so many services to fill those gaps, and one of them being job coaches that stay with the client while they're working through the entire shift, ensuring that their safety, that they're doing the tasks they're supposed to be doing, they're focused on retraining and encouraging. And so the supervisor or manager or owner does not have to do that task over and over, and allowing him to focus on other tasks that he needs to complete. The fear of losing medical and cash benefits, that's always been the case. Most adults with dental disabilities cannot work more than 20 hours a week because their SSI will significantly change. So a lot of parents will not like this because sometimes they live off of this income. So it is a big burden. I feel like we need to make this a more fair trade, or just allowing them to integrate into a workforce setting without losing the benefits of having their SSI cut significantly would be such a great change for us. What can we do to increase the number of people with disabilities working in our community? Build partnership with and among employers, increase employer to employer outreach and strengthen referral relationships, build awareness and share resources, educate community, dispel myths, showcase success stories, recognize employers, prepare youth and adults with disabilities for work, start transitioning planning early, expand work-based learning, and develop its self-determination skills, prioritize employment of people with disabilities, strengthen the services, delivery systems, use initiatives, and improve transportation access. So these are just all the things that I did as a job developer when I was working in the day program under the employment sector. So I would we would have a tournament, a golf tournament, and we would invite all of our um, business partners, we would call them. So employers that were currently hiring or have hired or had a paid internship in their business, and then we would, if one of them hired more than 3 people, we would give them an award. And we did many little things like this to just get the word out. At some point, we were on the news. We got awards for recognition from the city of Los Angeles for supporting adults with disabilities in the workforce. And this made them feel so special and so heard that it motivated them to want to get a job and be successful like everyone else. There's a huge barrier in transportation. One of my biggest problems when working with adults with disabilities and getting them higher could have been probably the easiest task, but the hardest task was finding transportation. Um, there is no paid transportation from regional centers that can be accommodated at all hours of the day when they are working. Parents and family members work themselves, so sometimes they can't pick their son or daughter up, and putting that task onto the program or the facility that's providing the employment services is too expensive for us. So it just became sometimes the reasons why we couldn't place the client in a certain job location. And maybe it was too far from home, or if it wasn't the distance, it was just the hours that there was nobody available for them to pick them up. So this lost a lot of jobs for sure. One of the things that I want to point out is there's a lack of staff and training for adults with disabilities. They require a group of individuals or support staffs that are willing to dedicate their job to professionally provide services to these individuals. Um, as you see right there, we take out the this and think about ability. What are their abilities? What can they do? Where can they do it? How can they do it? And how can we support them for them to do it? So creating very creative accommodations are going to be needed. Job coaching, employment support, transition. As you see right there, they can do cash register. They can do most steps and job positions as long as they receive a little more training than the regular person. So employment first training, a path to community life is so big, it's so important, and it's definitely necessary. And if we have more Medicaid cuts, that will reduce the amount of direct support professionals available for these individuals, because the less money there is there, the less that it can be allocated to these services. The role of social workers and advocacy. Social workers must advocate for policy reforms that address exclusion and lack autonomy. It is crucial to bring the lives experience of those with disabilities to attention policy to ensure rights are more than just academic concepts. The ultimate goal is to eliminate administrative inconsistencies and create equal opportunity in education and community participation. The role of a social worker is to just speak on the behalf of these individuals. There is so much more we can do. The fact that I still see a lot of these clients just sitting around at a Starbucks or hanging out in the McDonald's at Target or Walmart means that they're not being included in society as much as they should be. A lot of times they're just left sitting there with no conversation. Nobody's acknowledged them or asked them how their day was or anything. I know that is probably the best we can do at this point for them, but I think we can do more with some advocacy. During the pandemic, these individuals were the ones that suffered the most because they lost their community integration programs, and then some of them never went back again. So isolation and loneliness is very big for these individuals, and we're talking more general now and less about employment. But if employment gives us purpose, gives us a quality of life, you can only imagine what it can do for a person with mental disabilities. A pathway to quality of life. Meaningful inclusion is achieved when individuals have access to housing of their choice, privacy, healthcare, and employment. Social justice. The movement for disabilities inclusion follows the same paths of civil rights protection for children, the elderly, and people of color. The rights to autonomy. True inclusion challenges restrictive guardianship, which often stripes individuals' rights to, and it denies them the ability to make their own life choices. So sometimes this guardianship restricts adults that can work, want to work, from never being able to work. Why? Because it removes their authority to say yes. So if I have a client that comes into my employment program and they say, I want to work, I want to get a job, and that's all. I've always wanted to work at Five Below, whatever, some store here in California. Then what ends up happening is I have to ask permission to that parent to see if they can work. And in many cases, the parent does not want them to, because they will lose part of their Social Security and they live off of it. Sometimes these parents don't work, so they all live off of whatever income this individual brings. Sometimes there's multiple individuals in the home with disabilities, some more severe than others, and therefore the parent counts on that income for their safety net. So it just becomes this very weird area of this individual. You look at them, you don't really see a disability, you see all their abilities, you know they are capable, but there's nothing you can do to support them. So it's very sad to see that, but this is where social workers can use those stories and get themselves involved in this community to promote less restrictive guardianship, because sometimes it's not necessary to be provided. These agencies here are one of the top agencies that I know have really strived for inclusion and have really worked in including and integrating individuals into the workforce. So we have the ARC, Help People with Developmental Disabilities Work and Thrive. Best Buddies is another program that has significantly uh, integrated all their clients into an employment. They made big contracts with many companies. And then Goodwill actually hires them within the Goodwill stores, which is amazing. They also have contracts with other companies. And then, I mean, the weird part about this with Goodwill is, yes, they work in competitive employment because they get paid a fair wage when they're working in their stores. However, they're only working within their own peers. So segregation is still kind of there, because a lot of times they'll have a group of them go to one store and do a large amount of repetitive work, which would be like, digging through boxes or sorting donations, and they're all together working together. Do they hire people without disabilities? Yes, they have other individuals working alongside with them. That does still feel a little segregated in that aspect. Ability Inc. is another big community program that has also integrated all of their clients into a competitive work initiative, and they have been very good at supporting their clients in that area as well. So this is the end of my presentation. Have we come a long way? Yes, we have come a very long way. There is some programs out there, but my fear and ultimately why I wanted to do this presentation is because in order to receive the vocational educational services, they require the budgets in education and Medicaid. And if any of these cuts do happen, and the first people who are going to be affected are going to be individuals with developmental disabilities. The first thing that they're going to lose are programs like integrated programs, because those are considered not necessary to survive. They're always going to keep the medical programs, the things that are needed to survive, versus cutting those, of course. And it makes sense. Obviously, medicine and health well-being is more important. But when you have a population of loneliness and depression, then you are now increasing a lot of more behavioral problems. They are a population that will fall into drugs and alcohol if not guided correctly, if not supported. So it can get very bad very quickly, and they're always the last ones to receive the support that they need. And it's just not fair. And I feel like as a social worker, when I become one, this will continue to be my passion for a long time. So thank you for your time, and it was great doing this presentation.